Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. You hear that name and you immediately think of effortless, God-given genius, right? But what if I told you that the popular story, the myth of this perfect prodigy, isn't the whole story? What if there's a much more interesting, much more human person hiding behind the legend?
I mean, just look at this number, over 600 compositions. And he did all this in a life that was only 35 years long. It's mind-boggling. We're talking symphonies, operas, concertos, the whole shebang. The incredible promise everyone saw in him as a kid, yeah, he more than delivered.
So that's the real question, isn't it? Because behind that legend, there was a rebel who picked fights with the establishment. There was an artist who was drowning in debt and depression. And in the end, there was a man who was literally staring death right in the face. So that's what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to look for the real Mozart.
To really get Mozart, you have to start at the very beginning, with what everyone back then called the miracle. And you know what? That's not really an exaggeration. His talent wasn't something he just learned. It was like it was baked into his DNA from day one.
I mean, Mozart is the poster child for the term child prodigy. He's the textbook definition. But here's the truly wild part. You know how a lot of prodigies, they kind of peak early and then fade away? Not Mozart. No way. His genius just got more intense, more complex, and deeper, right up until the very end.
Just look at this timeline. It's actually insane. At 5 years old, when most of us are figuring out how to tie our shoes, he's composing music. By 9, he's writing full-blown symphonies. There's this great story where a young composer asked him for advice on writing a symphony, and Mozart told him, "Why don't you start with something smaller?" The kid complained, "But you wrote symphonies when you were 10. And Mozart just said yes, but I didn't have to ask how. So, when you've got a kid with this kind of talent, you don't just keep him hidden away on Salzburg. His father, Leopold, knew he had something incredible on his hands, and he decided he had to show his son off to the world. This kicked off a massive, years-long European tour that was, well, it was equal parts dazzling and totally grueling. And this quote right here, from his dad, tells you everything you need to know about his mindset. See, Leopold wasn't just a proud father. He was a good composer himself, and he genuinely believed his son was a literal miracle from God. He felt it was his sacred duty to parade this wonder child in front of every royal court in Europe.
And what a tour it was. He was an absolute sensation. He'd perform for emperors and queens, and he'd do these amazing party tricks, like playing the keyboard perfectly, even with a cloth covering his hands. The stories are just legendary. My favorite is when he was 6, he slipped on a polished floor, and a young princess helped him up. That princess was Marie Antoinette. His response? He immediately said, "You're good. When I grow up, I will marry you." The confidence.
But here's the thing, that celebrated wonder child doesn't stay a child forever. He grows up. And as Mozart became a man, he started to get really tired of the restrictions of his job back in Salzburg. He wanted something more than just being a prized possession. He wanted artistic and personal freedom.
And this is where the real trouble started. It's a classic case of a change in management, a good boss/bad boss situation. The old Archbishop of Salzburg, he loved the Mozarts, he supported them. But his successor, this guy Colloredo, had a totally different view. To him, musicians were servants, plain and simple, no different than butlers. And he absolutely could not stand Mozart's independent, rebellious spirit.
So everything finally boiled over. The Archbishop refused to let Mozart go perform for the Emperor. They had a massive shouting argument, and Mozart did the unthinkable. He demanded to be fired. Now you have to understand, that was a shocking move back then. Artists were basically owned by their patrons. But Mozart gambled everything on himself. He was going to Vienna to become one of the very first great freelance artists.
So he gets to Vienna, and this next phase of his life is just a complete whirlwind. This is where he would experience his biggest triumphs and his most crushing defeats. It's where he created his greatest masterpieces, and it's also where his life really started to unravel. At first, things were incredible. Vienna absolutely adored him. He was a rock star pianist, a celebrated composer. It all peaked with The Marriage of Figaro. And this wasn't just a hit opera, it was revolutionary. It made fun of the aristocracy and made the clever servants the heroes of the story. A really bold and some thought dangerous move at the time.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there? There was a huge problem. While he was hanging out in these aristocratic circles, he developed a taste for the high life. The problem was, he didn't have their bank account.
So he was living way beyond his means, which meant he was under this constant, crushing pressure of debt.
This really captures the big paradox of his time in Vienna. His artistic output, his genius, it stayed sky high always. But his popularity with the public, it started to dip. People found his later music a little too complex, too deep. And as his fame went down, his financial situation, well, it went right into the basement.
And yet, and this is the absolute miracle of Mozart, while he's writing these desperate letters to friends, begging for money, suffering from what he called black thoughts, what does he do? He produces some of the most beautiful music ever written. In one unbelievable burst of creativity over just 7 weeks, he composes his final 3 symphonies, music that was so deep and powerful you could almost hear his own struggles in it.
And that leads us to his final year, 1791. He's sick, he's in debt, but he's still composing like a man possessed. And then, his life takes a final turn so dramatic, it feels like something he would have written himself.
So get this, a mysterious stranger shows up at his door. He's tall, thin, dressed head to toe in gray. He won't give his name or say who sent him. He just has a secret commission for Mozart. The task? To write a requiem, a mass for the dead. I mean, how creepy is that?
Now, for Mozart, who was already seriously ill and kind of superstitious, this was a terrifying sign. He became completely and utterly convinced that this stranger was some kind of messenger from the afterlife, and that the requiem he was being paid to write was actually for his own funeral.
And in the most tragic twist of all, his fears came true. He worked on that piece with a feverish intensity, reportedly telling his wife that he could smell death in the room. He passed away on December 5th, 1791, at just 35 years old. And that haunting, beautiful requiem, it was left unfinished.
So how do we put it all together? How do you reconcile the myth of the perfect divine prodigy with the messy reality of this struggling, deeply human man? The answer, of course, is in the music he left for us.
Because his ultimate genius wasn't just technical skill. It was his incredible, unparalleled ability to take the entire range of his life, the joy, the rebellion, the debt, the darkness, and transform all of that complex human experience into music that speaks to every single one of us. And hey, don't just take my word for it. His genius was obvious to the other masters of his time. The great composer Joseph Haydn, who was a close friend, once said this to Mozart's father. I mean, that's the ultimate praise from one master to another. It just cements his place in history forever.
So we're left with this thought. Mozart's life shows us that genius is almost never easy or effortless. It's often forged in fire, in struggle. And his immortal music is the testament to that reality, this beautiful, complex sound that reminds us of both the incredible triumph and the deep tragedy of a life that was lived right on the edge of human possibility.